Welcome back. In this video I prepare the panel work for final painting. So this is the front guard, it's off of the XJ900. I'm going to keep it stock because I think it really suits the bike and the build. Just cleaning up the side covers, been laying around for a while, and I'm just using some premium body filler, and all I'm doing here is trying to get some of the imperfections out. So you can see it's fairly light film, applying a good amount of pressure and trying to get it on as smooth as possible. Just means that, the smoother you put it on, the less sanding you need to do. So I just cover both side covers, the seat and the tank. And one thing with the tank that I really don't like is that seam. So I don't see this very often. I don't know why people don't do this, but I've chosen to, and I just don't want to have that seam like that. So I'm going to fill that up on the bottom, and around the front I'll bend that seam around so the fill is actually quite thin there. There's only be lucky to be a millimetre on the front edge because I've knocked it down already. And I just think it's a much tidier look like this. And the other thing is that chamfer on the bottom lines up perfectly to the way I've designed the custom side covers, so it just will flow straight on. So body filler there, there's a couple of imperfections on the tank itself, so I'll put filler around various spots, and at this point I've pretty much got everything ready for sanding. So the next step is sanding, and start off with 40 grit, then 80, and at this point all you're really doing is your contouring, shaping. You're not worried about getting it smooth. So it's the way to do it in my view. So it comes off pretty easy. Here's the seat. It's the shape I want, and now I'll progressively work through the next stage, which is getting rid of all the scratches. So there's the tank. You can see a lot of that body filler has come off, and that bottom edge has come up really good, and you can see the front there's no seam showing at all. Next stage, I use a bit of glazing putty, and you can see the front guard there just on the left. There's a little imperfection on the top, so they're the sort of things I'm trying to get out with this glazing putty. So I put a thin film on that. I do the same with the side covers, seat and the tank, and all I'm trying to do is get as many imperfections out before I get to the priming stage, just to make that process a bit easier. Now this sounds pretty easy. At this point I'm using wet and dry, about 240 grit, and you can see it cleaning up the tank, and it's just taking it to the next level where it's getting rid of most scratches and preparing this for priming. So given a large section of the tank is bare metal, and you can see just on that side there is a bit of body filler. That's the repair I did, you can see in an earlier video. I need to etch prime this to give the primer something to stick to. So the last thing I do is I just put the seat together, bolt the tank on. I'm just checking the fitment between the seat, the side panels and the tank. So you can see here it all fits really nicely. I do a bit of work on the side covers just to get that edge gap right and get it to match up to the tank properly. So I'm using Wattle Super Etch Primer, and this is a etch primer or primer, and you don't need much. So I'm just putting on one coat, and all this mainly is doing is covering over the putty, but it's also acid based, and it's etching into the metal. So that's the main purpose of it, is to give the primer something robust to stick to. So you can see here it goes on really easy. One coat, and I just let that dry. Now, etch primer, you don't generally sand. It's not a filler. It's simply there just to create adherence between bare metal and primer. So what I do after this, once it's dried, I just scuff it up a little bit to give the primer something decent to stick to. I've ended up buying another gun. So this is a DeVelbus FLG5, and I'm using a U-POL high build primer filler. So if you're going to do this sort of thing, just make sure you're safe and wear proper gloves and the appropriate mask. So I mix this up properly, and when I spray it, I'm just spraying all of these panels, and you start with just a light coat, and I let it flash off a little bit, and then I put a heavier coat. Now on the bottom here, nobody's ever going to see this. I just do this one light coat, and then I give it one decent coat, and that's it. And then on the bit I'm actually going to spray, I do the same light coat, and I put 2 heavier coats on, and you can see it going on here. It goes on really easy, and this is starting to look pretty good. Once I got to that point, I put what's called a dust coat on, which is just any old can of paint really, just a light coat, and I coat all the panels. And the idea of this, and you can see it on the tank here, is you don't want much paint on there, but it's just so that when you use wet and dry, you can see the low spots, because any low spot won't sand obviously, and with that dust coat it will just show up really clearly. So at this point I'm using 240 wet and dry, and you know, the primer filler rubs off pretty easy. And as I do this, you can see there's the odd low spot, and there's a couple of bits that are starting to just show metal, so it's all very close. I've got a little bit more touching up to do here before I put the final colour on, but it's literally there now. There's certainly no major problems. Now if you look in my earlier video, this side here I had to actually cut the side of this tank out and weld a new bit in, and this side's actually come up perfect. So I've got this now all done, the contouring's right, and that is pretty much ready. You can see that bottom edge has come up really good as well. I use POR 15 in this tank, give it a really good clean. So again, if you want to see that, check out my earlier video. So at this point, I just want to paint underneath in black. So I'm painting underneath the seat, the tank, front guard, and the side covers, and that way I can just touch up the little bits that are left on the top of the tank, and that'll be ready for final colour. So just reasonably, well, it was a nice coat there, and I just end up putting 2 coats on. Goes on really easy, and that paint is awesome actually. So at this point, all the bottoms of the panels are done. The tops are so close to final colour, and you can see them here. This is the bottom. In the next video, I will finish off the final paint finally on this bike, and all I need to do is make a final decision on what colour I want to do it. So not long to go now. I've hummed and ahed about the final colour, so you'll see in the next video, see what you think. But yeah, another look at this tank de-seamed. I really like the look of that and that bottom edge. Stay tuned.